Okay.
Top left.
Sorry.
Download. Yep.
Okay, that's better.
Top right. Top left. Top right. Fire.
Okay.
Yeah. So what am I doing?
So that's
This
not
way.
that. Yeah.
This way. Yeah, this
Okay.
way. Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah. Right. Okay. Emmy, Alberto, Gary, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I am aware that I am now all that is between you and the end of the conference. So it's I'll do my best to rattle through this with some level of energy. I couldn't think of a title. That's why, Alberto, I never told you what to put on the thing. But I'm going to basically talk about these things. We've been hopefully seen this before with Samina's presentation. I'll tell you what these are. I thought that, given that there's so much fantastic graphics here, I will put up the two prettiest pictures I've ever managed to produce, because this was my implementation of Boyd's. This is the carnage that you get if you don't get the parameters right. And this is what you can do if you actually start putting a bit of planned emergence in it and giving them some goals and letting them talk to each other. But to this day, I never did find out. I really, really wanted to know what was going through the mind of this one when it decided to just, they've been given a goal over here and it's, oh no, I'll go over there. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, maybe that was just a sort of symbol of my entire career, but I mean, anyway, so I'm afraid that is the prettiest picture you're going to get now, right? Okay, but I'm going to start with just a few basic premises, of course. The first one is that actually the claim is that the future is inevitably, irreversibly, and irretrievably hybrid. So we are going to see interaction between human or natural intelligence, which we call NLife, and computational or artificial intelligence, which is our ALife. And these systems are basically going to be NALife. We're still going to have to respect the laws of requisite variety or requisite complexity as they were formed in cybernetics. And essentially what that means is that there is a finite capacity for processing information which limits the team performance. So the thing that matters then is how efficiently you organize that team. And one of the ways that you would do that efficiency is that you establish structures and roles and procedures and rules, which we refer to as information. Institutions. And so essentially we're getting at what the previous speaker was talking about, was saying about social construction. So we're constructing our own reality for ourselves. And we refer to these things as social arrangements. So these are the mutually agreed conventions, norms, contracts, laws, whatever you want to call them, that we voluntarily comply with and we use to hold each other accountable for when things go wrong. And the fourth premise is that there are some colossal out there who will actually use this for their own interests and not a public interest, as we will see. So there's the basic premises. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get through this in two halves. The first half is going to be a sort of like historical survey of the issues that we were facing about our organization. And the second half is the problems that is going to cause, we think, for these NALife systems. So the actually I came to this because I was trying to solve problems of resource management in ad hoc networks. And it turned out this is the kind of thing that's quite commonly faced in society, and it's about common pool resource management. So you have a bunch of autonomous agents, which for us are going to be our interacting NLife, NALife thing. But what they've got to do is they've got to provision to a shared resource, and then they want to appropriate from it. And then one of the examples we used is this example of a community energy system. So you've got this nice smart house with a smart meter. You've got some way of provisioning to a pool, because you've got some nice PV cells on your roof, and you've got some way of appropriating for that pool, because that's all your smart devices which are using energy, and you've got some kind of storage. And sometimes, the sun's shining, but so you're down the beach, you don't want to waste the sun, so you generate energy anyway, even though you're not using it. So you fill things up. What happens when you've got too much? Well, you give it to someone else. And there are other times, when it's not sunny at all. This is the UK we're talking about. So it's pouring with rain. You've used up your battery, even with whatever was stored in electric vehicles gone. You're going to have to get something from somewhere else, yeah. And so this is why you start teaming up with other houses, and you make yourself a smart village. But even then, on seasonal variations, you get the same problem as well. So you make smart towns, and then so on, and eventually you connect to a national grid. Yeah. Why this is interesting, this particular scenario, is because it's not so very far-fetched, but it shows up many issues of self-organization and self-governance. I mean, we're already talking about multi-layer systems in one of the earlier talks. And one thing you can see here is that you've got a delegated problem. Yeah? So it turns out that there's something really important in power systems called voltage and frequency control. Yeah, yeah, who knew? Yeah, I mean, but apparently it's really important to get this right. Otherwise, these appliances don't work. Yeah. And so the power systems people had this completely different idea of a smart fridge from the AI people. AI people thought smart fridge, oh, this is a thing that's internet connected. It'll tell you what's in the fridge, how long it'll last for, tell you what recipes you can make, and so on. Yeah. For the power systems thing, their idea of a smart fridge was to get 10,000 of these things together, yeah, and then get them to synchronize their compressor cycles in order to do this voltage and frequency control. It's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. And the thing is, I don't care. Yeah. So long as my vegetables in my freezer, my vegetable drawer are nice and crispy, my fridges can do what the hell they like. Yeah, they can be doing the can down the Champs-Elysees as far as I'm concerned. It is in terms of the way they synchronize themselves. Get on with it. Yeah, I mean, I can delegate that to them. Yeah. Second level up, though, is that it's programmed. Yeah, so a lot of these appliances come with an A and a B setting these days. Yeah, and the A setting is do it now, and the B setting says do it when it's economically viable. Yeah, when the price is lowest. Yeah, so then I'm telling my washing machine what I want it to do, and then it's negotiating with other washing machines to come up with a schedule to satisfy everybody's constraints. Yeah. And then you get a problem that's that's interactive. So we might all be using too much energy in our village, yeah, and we're going to exhaust our resources, and we don't want to connect to the national grid. So maybe we could do something to protect ourselves, yeah. And unless you've really got some understanding of the semiotics of this thing, you don't want to start turning people's TV offs in the middle of the I don't know, the European Cup final, unless you're English and you're losing to the Spanish. I mean, so I've had enough. Yeah. But unless you actually know what's going on, then you want to actually give it to the people to make the decision. So now the humans are making the decisions. And at the highest level, you might think that this is attentive, yeah, because these things are not going to install themselves. We've got to make some decisions about what kind of resources we're going to use, how we're going to program our appliances, and so on. Yeah. So now the humans are the loop. Yeah. And you can see actually that same kind of thing, same kind of problem of self-organization and self-governance starts coming in at every level, yeah? And each level affects each other. Yeah? So that's where we start, yeah. And so if we want to model this sort of thing, this is where the games begin. So you may have seen these linear public good games before, but what we want to be able to do is essentially, so you work out what you've got, you contribute what you want, you demand what you need, and you're allocated what there is, and then you take what you can, okay? And the point about these things is that some of these are institutional actions, and some of them are actually physical actions. Yeah? So this allocation is actually an institutional action. Somebody has said to you, you've got this much energy. When you actually appropriate from it, you're actually doing a physical action. You're taking up to and possibly even more than that limit. Yeah. So this is the assumptions that we're making here. Of course, we start off with rational self-interested agents, but we extend this here. One of the critical things here, though, is that there is an economy of scarcity. Yeah. There isn't enough to go round to satisfy everybody all the time. So you've got to make some critical decisions about who gets what when. Yeah? We're still dealing with incomplete and inconsistent information. So if you took the union of everybody's knowledge base, it might actually be inconsistent. And there may be some stuff you just don't know about. And there's no full disclosure. This is what Hewitt, when he discussed open systems, he called arm's length relationships. Yeah? So we can't go around deconstructing everybody and seeing exactly what they're doing. Yeah? And finally, we are expecting these things to go wrong. Yeah. So there are things that we're going to have to do. We're going to have to monitor things to see if people are not doing what they're supposed to do. But bearing in mind that monitoring comes with a cost. Yeah. Then even when we've done monitoring, we've found out that something's going wrong. And for those of us who are in the previous session, it doesn't mean that you start punishing people straight away. You actually have to be a little bit more sophisticated about this. Yeah. And there are other occasions where you actually want some discretion in this, because it might have been an act of triage that's gone on, might have been a misunderstanding. Unfortunately, it might have been an act of malice. Yeah. So we're expecting things to go wrong, but we need to know how things go wrong, and we need to repair them when these things happen. So then what we do is actually we play this linear public's good game. Yeah. Several times, multiple iterations, one after the other. Yeah. We get the agents to provision to the common pool. We compute what the allocation should be. We tell them what they can have. They help themselves. Yeah. How hard can this possibly be? Turns out to be really quite hard. Yeah. What could possibly go wrong? Well, quite a lot, actually, but as it turns out. So firstly, quick aside. Yeah. This is how we do it. Yeah. So we have this methodology called socially inspired computing, which is my excuse for nicking stuff from the social sciences, formalizing that out of it, and then claiming that this was interdisciplinary research. Okay. Yeah. So you'll see where we've gone to get some of this. And then we build these systems. And I'm sorry, I'm a completely unreconstructed Prolog programmer. I refuse to give it up. Yeah. And I use this multi-threaded Prolog called QProlog. And basically, each one of these things is a thread, which is launched. So I have no television in my home, but I do have 10 computers, and they're all networked together so I can run these systems. Okay. So they're talking to each other over this network, and they're basically sitting there embedded in the environment, waiting for messages to come in, and then they will respond to it. Yeah. And where it can come from is another agent or from the environment, and they have to react. Yeah. So one of the things I've learned in the last week, I'm really intrigued by this, not having just an agent event loop, but an agent expectation loop, in terms of trying to actually implement some kind of inactivist agent, which I think is a really, really interesting possibility here. Anyway, that's the aside. How do we do it? Okay, so the first question we want to ask, is this sustainable? Yeah. So there were various results talked about in the 1960s that's claiming that collective action at scale was not actually possible. Yeah. So there was the zero contribution thesis from Manker Olson, who said that unless there was some form of coercion involved, people will not actually collaborate to solve these kinds of problems. Yeah. And then there was Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons, where he said, well, you have any one of these common pool resources, people will act in such a way to realize their goals in the short term, or maximize their interest in the short term, even if that's not in their interest in the long term, because they end up depleting the resource, they exhaust it. Yeah. But if you read Hardin's papers, he's always talking about, imagine you're in this situation. Well, suppose you're in that situation. Yeah? But then Eleanor Ostrom came along, and I'll paraphrase her entire book slightly by saying that that's not inevitable, yeah? Because she did huge amounts of field work, looked at irrigation systems in Spain, fisheries in Japan, forestries in Switzerland, and demonstrated that it was actually possible for groups of people to maintain a common pool resource even over generations. And the way they did this, she said, was that they came up with these things called self-governing institutions. And the key thing about these institutions was the issue of self-determination. Yeah? That the rules of the institution were selected, modified, enforced by those who were affected by them. Then what she did is she looked at all the institutions and she came up with 8 common features. She observed that if those 8 features were all present, then the community was able to sustain its resource. If some of them were missing, then it would not be. Yeah. And so she said, okay, well, if we're ever faced with one of these situations, don't just try to luck to evolve something. supply it. We know what the features are. Let's design institutions that have these things in common. And for this work, shortly after one financial crash, so they couldn't give it to the people whose equations had caused the crash in the first place that they had been doing. So apart from the fact that it was extraordinarily insightful work, she was awarded the Nobel Prize for Economic Science 2009, and it turned out it was nothing to do with the fact the first paper I published on her work was in 2008. Yes, and and I did make this mistake of actually trying to tell that joke to her. Yeah, so, so it did go okay because she looked at me and you could see her thinking, he's English, he's probably joking, I will laugh. But oh my God, the ice ages came and went while I was waiting for those thought processes to complete. Yeah. Anyway, the question for us then became, can we turn these design principles into self-modifying code? So basically, you take the design principles and you turn them into protocols, which our multi-agent systems could then execute directly in Prolog. Yeah? And then it turned out that when we tried to get a bunch of agents to maintain a common pool resource, if they only had a few of the principles, they couldn't do it. If we put all the principles in, they could. Yeah. And I told that to Eleanor Ostrom, and I could see her now thinking, I told you so. But actually what she said was, oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. Anyway, so right, yeah. Next question, no. Okay, so we can sustain things, but is it fair? Yeah. It turns out there's many different theories of fairness. Yeah. And then what happened was I had a colleague who was in the Department of Informatics at King's College, who was a professor of philosophy. We were talking about something else. I went over to have a chat with him. We're sitting in his office. He says, do you want some tea? Yes, please. Okay, I'll go make the tea because King's College can't afford PhD students to go make their own tea. And so while I'm doing a bit of academic browsing, I see his book on the shelf, little thin yellow tome with, of course, yes, and it's got distributive justice written down the side. So, okay, I'll have a look at this, yeah. And inside, start flicking through this, Rescher said there were 7 basic ways of achieving distributive justice. Like, okay, 7 is less than 8, right? Yeah, so if we can do Ostrom's principles at 8, must be easier to do at 7, okay? So surely, yeah. And so then we took this away, yeah. And the basic thing he said is that all of these theories of justice will work sometimes, but none will work all the time. So the important thing was to identify relevance in context, and this were legitimate claims. And then the key thing that you had to do was, if there were multiple claims, how you integrated them in case of plurality and reconcile them in case of conflict. Yeah? And so then the questions are, can we turn these legitimate claims into self-modifying code? Yeah? And I wouldn't ask that question if the answer hadn't been yes, in fact, we can. Yeah, and we had some interesting results about this. That if you allowed the agents to self-organize the weights that they want to put on the claims that you give them, you can actually create a series of what are objectively unfair allocations, but produce a fairer result overall. Yeah? So each iteration of this linear public goods game, because it's an economy of scarcity, there's not enough to go around. So somebody's getting nothing, and there's no metric. We had a look at various ones. We used the Gini index in the end, but there's nothing that will tell you that it's fair if people are getting nothing. But because it averages out, overall, you can get something that is actually reasonably fair. Okay, I have no chance of getting through this. Never mind. Next question was, is it legitimate? Yes. So does this self-determination have the consent of those who are affected? And for this, I was fortunate enough to meet Josiah Ober, who's a professor of political science at Stanford University. And he has this theory about basic democracy, which he claims is how you do collective self-governance with these conventional rules. And the key issue about basic democracy is you're not concerned with the kind of things that liberal democracy is concerned with, rights, values, and so on. Yeah. But just these 3 things of welfare, security, and the most important thing is to restrict the absolutist tendencies and degeneration into different political regimes. Yeah? So he came up with this thought experiment about a question of social order, is how actually can a community realize the benefits derived from social coordination, cooperation, without actually submitting to a ruling oligarchy or monarchy. Yeah? So, well, what question are we going to ask? Yeah, can we turn this into self-modifying code? And it turns out, Oh dear, yes, we can. So write a simulator for this in Q Prolog. Had some really interesting questions about historical political science, because Josh Ober could look at this, and normally a historical political scientist asks counterfactuals. They would say, what if then? So we're saying, what if that's? I don't know, yeah, but we can try it. We'll just change this parameter and see what happens. And say, oh yeah. And it was interesting to him because it kind of confirmed that the classical Athenians were actually working out problems to their collective action and public interest problems by themselves. There wasn't some external authority that was actually telling them what to do. They weren't going to the Delphic Oracle and getting the instructions. They were genuinely working these things out through processes of learning and innovation. And the other thing that came out of this was the idea of democracy by design, that if actually we do want to supply these institutions and democracy is a principle that we actually want to have, you design this system with this requirement in mind. You don't sort of like build your system and got all its functionality and then try and graft some kind of democratic principles on top of that. Next question was, is it socially productive? Are we doing something useful? And for this, we looked at a theory from psychology called the regulatory theory of social influence. It's basically saying that the target's in control. There's a symmetry here. It's not just sources looking for targets to influence, but targets looking for sources to be influenced by. You'd also exchange processing rules, and part of the reason for this is that you want to delegate the cognitive load of actually doing this information processing. But you had to have it for different reasons, either to agree on something cultural or agree on something that is a ground truth. Oh, one other question. Yeah, can we turn R to assigned to self-modifying? Well, I didn't do this. Samina did, right? Okay, and then yeah, Samina wrote about 3 different theses answering various different variations on the questions. Yeah, and so if you want to know more about this, you can consult the vast body of work that Samina has produced as just part of her thesis. Yeah. Anyway, so can I have 5 more minutes? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay, right. So, yeah. After that brief and slow run through history, we've actually got this thing of planned emergence now. The product of the harmonic interaction and enlightened orchestration between NLife and ALife in these NALife organizations, according to all those principles we've just established. Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? Well, quite a lot actually. So this is a paper that I wrote, and it should have been chat SHT, but I mean, yeah. But the problems with this we identified is, there's so much that could possibly go wrong here. Yeah, possibly the fraud, deception, misinformation, hallucination. I think this is the first postmodernist technology in the way that it actually sort of rejects common knowledge. Yeah, and it's a kind of the new obscurantism. Yeah, I mean the obscurantists back in the time of the Enlightenment were trying to make knowledge inaccessible. Well, this is making non-knowledge accessible. Yeah. The possibility of greed advertising, and the idea is that the first one is always free. Yeah. So you see people using these things, and keep on using it until you're dependent. Yeah, and then see what happens. Right? What do you reckon is going to happen? Yeah. Do you think? Yeah. We talked about altruism. Yeah. Right. So yeah. There's a strong whiff of neo-colonialism about this. I mean, the huge amount of energy that it takes to train these things, and the people who are actually doing all the labeling are generally in Africa and India. Really deep questions about intellectual property and theft, in terms of the way that pictures and music are sampled. Yeah, and our intellectual property laws are just not up to snuff for this sort of thing. Really concerned about the impact on engineering. I mean, one of the most important things, is to be able to repair and repurpose things. But if you're just sort of like asking questions, getting the answer, not even querying the answer, questioning what you're getting, you're just a mechanic of some kind. And in particular, the second art of cognitive scheme and art of rhetoric, because there are some people. This is a bit of a UK thing because we have this strange educational system which has private schools that we call public schools. And of course, these people are getting all the benefit of being able to learn how to construct an argument, how to persuade people that their argument is correct, and how to have some kind of credibility in the production of that argument. If you get people who just ask critical questions and just put it into ChatGPT and then just repeat what they've been given, you're going to end up in a situation, we've got two tiers of intelligence, basically. And in any kind of argument, those people who've been trained in rhetoric and those people who've been well, those people trained in rhetoric will slaughter those people who've not. And this really, really concerns me. I think it's worse than that, because, organizations, as at least I understand it, whether it's an academic institution or a corporate firm, is a political debate. And all throughout it, there's an ongoing dispute over the goals that are being pursued and the means that you're pursuing that joint endeavor. And as far as I can tell, these things, especially the big tech companies, frankly, the academic institutions too, are under the control of a managerial or asset-owning class who are monopolizing all the political rights. And I'll appeal to this quote from Norbert Wiener from The Human Use of Human Beings. He says that if the human being is condemned and restricted to perform the same function over and over again, he will not be a very good and, not to mention, a good human being. And this is the point, the nature of work is becoming that there are people that we need to have involved somehow, but they are being given, as Samina said in her presentation, no discretion, no autonomy, the reduction of their neuroplasticity because they're just repeating the same things. You are turning the person into an element of the machine. If you do that, they will be an element of the machine. And so as a result of this, technology is coming, frankly, a bit like the law. That there is an in-group who it protects but does not bind, an out-group who it binds but does not protect. So what is going on here? I'm already over time, so I only did the first half. Do you want me to, what do you want me to do?
We have the closing ceremony.
Yeah, just starting a few minutes ago.
That's right, yes. What do you want to do? Do you want to go to the closing ceremony? Yeah. So this is what I know about organizations anyway, and my big fear, right? Yes. The second half of the talk, which I I prepared a 50-minute talk for 25 minutes. Can I be invited back next year? Because, okay, very, very briefly, what I want to know is how we got from this. This is Fukuyama's end of history. He said, we're all going to live in nice liberal democracies from here on in. What we actually get, if you go into the bookshelves of the bookstores, go to the political science shelves, you see books with all these kinds of titles. Anti-pluralism, how democracies die, the people versus democracy. It's, that vision was just so wrong. You get from this, Murray Bookchin was talking about this thing he called post-scarcity anarchism, that we would no longer have to be worried about scarcity, at least some of us in Western Europe. And he was claiming this is providing us the basis for the first time in history, the material basis for liberation. And instead we get books like this with techno-feudalism, which is techno-feudalism, same as this title here. George Zarkadakis in his book refers to the same thing. Joel Kotkin calls it neo-feudalism. We published a special issue of Technology and Society magazine on modern indentured servitude. And there are all sorts of other analyses of the vision that, there's a small group of people that have a very, very different perception of human dignity for themselves than they do for everybody else. And the essence is, is that basically we've got this entropic tendency to some kind of oligarchic regime brought about by democratic backsliding, where the political institutions are hollowed out, and this post-scarcity autarky, which is the government has complete control. And our diagnosis of this is that basically there's this inequitable distribution of power, and we are increasingly seeing domination by coercion, knowledge, and charisma, and that coercion includes the control over the technology. Okay, and so the question is, how do we get stuck with hierarchical arrangements, and what we do to get unstuck? And that is our our architecture for re-empowerment, which involves these 4 basic pillars. One of which I'm going to, oh, this is going not difficult. Oh, you want, one of which is Samina's other work on socially guided machine learning. And she's built this really, really impressive system, which actually is one of the first times I've seen a way of getting users, generative AI, and multi-agent system visualization in a kind of harmonic triad. Yeah. Do I oversell your work? Yeah. You're very welcome. Yeah. So just to summarize, we really want to expand citizen involvement to re-establish the public ownership of means of social coordination. There's a real need for the envisionment of deliberative democracy. So it's actually giving people controls over states of affairs. Yeah. And the tech-aided future, we want to leverage AI for empowerment through partnership rather than exploitation through domination. And I'll leave you to read that takeaway. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.